In the 1930s, people in Bursa began finding dead storks in the streets. Some fell onto rooftops. Some landed in crowded markets. And every evening, the birds above the city scattered in terror for reasons no one could understand. But the people of Bursa were not looking high enough, because far above the city, something was waiting in the sky. And tonight, you will hear this dramatized story through the eyes of one of the storks that survived it. We flew over the sea for 13 nights. By the time we reached Anatolia, some of us were already dying. But the old storks feared something worse than hunger. They feared the eagles. I will tell you how it began. Not with the eagles. Not with the killing. Not with the bodies falling from the sky like strange rain onto the streets of a city that did not understand what was happening above its rooftops. It began with the wind. It always begins with the wind. I was born in a nest on the chimney of a schoolhouse, somewhere in the flatlands, somewhere where the rivers move slowly and the grass is tall and the frogs sing at night in a language I understood before I understood anything else. The nest was made of sticks and mud and the patience of my mother, who had built it the way her mother had built one before her, and her mother before that. The same chimney, the same corner, the same view of the same field stretching to the same horizon. We do not choose where we are born, but we remember it. We carry it inside us the way the wind carries pollen, invisibly, permanently. A map written in the blood. A direction that is not learned, but known. South in the autumn, north in the spring. That is the law. That is the only law we have. My first memory is of height, not the height of flight, the height of the nest. The chimney of the schoolhouse was tall, taller than the houses around it, taller than the church, taller than the single tree at the edge of the schoolyard where the children played. From the nest, I could see the world, not the whole world. My world, the field, the river, the marsh where the frogs lived, the road that went away in both directions and disappeared at the point where the earth met the sky. I could see the children below, coming out of the schoolhouse at midday, running, shouting. Their voices reaching me thinned by the height, turned into something like birdsong by the distance. I watched them. I did not understand them. I did not know what school was. I did not know what reading was, or writing, or the strange ritual of sitting in rows and staring at marks on a surface. But I watched, and I felt, without words, without thought, with only the body's raw and ancient sense of the world. I felt that there was something similar between us, between the children below and the chicks in the nest, the noise, the hunger, the constant, demanding, unashamed need to be fed and held and warm. We were the same in the beginning. We just went different ways. The first flight. I should tell you about the first flight, because the first flight is the migration in miniature. The first flight contains everything that comes after. The fear, the exhilaration, the moment when the ground falls away and you realize that you are no longer a thing that stands, but a thing that flies. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a life and a story. My mother stood on the edge of the nest. She looked at me. She made the sound. Not "I am here, I know you." A different sound, a sharper sound, a sound that meant now. I stood on the edge. The world was below me. The schoolyard, the children, the road, the field, the river, the marsh. Everything I had ever known, laid out beneath me like a map. And above me, the sky. the endless, formless, borderless sky. And my mother said, "Now." And I jumped, and the air caught me, and the air held me, and I flew. The joy of first flight is not a thing I can describe. It is not happiness. It is not excitement. It is not any of the words you use for the feeling of doing something wonderful. It is recognition. The body recognizing itself, the wings recognizing their purpose, the bones recognizing their hollowness, the lightness that was not emptiness but design, not weakness but engineering, the bones made hollow so that the body could be given to the air. I flew. I flew around the schoolhouse. I flew over the schoolyard. I flew across the field where the grass was tall and the wind made shapes in it that looked like waves on a green sea. And my mother flew beside me, and she made the sound. I am here. I know you. Stay close. I do not know what year it was by your counting. You count years the way you count coins, carefully, precisely, each one numbered and filed and placed in a sequence that makes sense to you. We do not count. We measure time by the length of the days, by the angle of the light, by the moment when the air changes, not the temperature, not the wind, but the air itself, the quality of it, the weight of it, and something in the chest says, go. Not a thought, not a decision, a pull, a tide inside the body that rises and rises until the feet leave the ground and the wings open and the earth falls away, and you are in the sky, and the sky is the only country that matters. That is how migration begins, not with a plan, with a pull. We gathered in the fields near the river, hundreds of us, perhaps more. I had never counted. Counting is a human sickness. We gathered. The old ones came first. The ones who had made the journey many times. The ones whose feathers were not as white as they had been, whose wing beats were slower, whose eyes had the clouded look of creatures who have seen too many skies and are beginning to forget which one is home. They stood in the field with their heads up, watching the south, reading the air the way your scholars read their books, with attention, with patience, with the understanding that what they were reading was a matter of life and death. The young ones came next, the ones born that spring, the ones who had never flown further than the far edge of the marsh. They were nervous. You could see it in the way they shifted their weight from foot to foot, in the way their heads turned at every sound, in the way they looked at the old ones and tried to read their faces for reassurance. The old ones did not offer reassurance. The old ones offered direction. South. Always south. My mother was beside me. She did not speak. We do not speak the way you do. We do not make words. But we communicate. With the angle of the head, with the position of the wings, with a low sound in the throat that is not a call and not a song, but something between. A vibration, a hum, the sound of one body saying to another body, I am here. I know you. Stay close. She made that sound. I pressed my wing against hers, and we waited for the signal. The signal is not a sound. It is a movement. One bird lifts, then another, then 3, then 10. And then the field is rising. The whole field, hundreds of wings beating at once, and the noise of it, the rushing, thundering, impossible noise of 500 storks taking to the air at the same moment is the loudest silence I have ever heard. Because inside the noise, there is no noise. Inside the beating of the wings, there is only the pull. South, south, south. The first days were easy. I say easy because I did not yet know what hard meant. I did not yet have a comparison. The first days were warm. The wind was behind us. The thermals, the columns of rising air that the sun pulls from the earth, the thermals were strong and reliable, and we rode them the way a leaf rides a river, without effort, without thought, spiraling upward in great slow circles until the earth was a painted floor beneath us, and the sky was a country without walls. I loved the thermals. I loved the feeling of being lifted, of surrendering the weight of the body to the air and letting the air decide, of closing the wings and floating and feeling the heat of the earth coming up through the belly like a hand. The old ones rode the thermals with their eyes closed. They had done this so many times that the sky was not a place anymore. It was a habit, a rhythm, a road they had memorized with their bones. I watched them. I watched the way they tilted a wing to catch a current, the way they shifted their weight to change direction, the way they read the clouds, not for beauty, but for information, for the shape of the wind, for the promise of lift or the threat of downdraft. I watched them and I learned, and the days passed, and the land below us changed. The fields gave way to forests. The forests gave way to hills. The hills gave way to mountains. And the mountains gave way to the sea. The sea. I want to tell you about the sea because the sea is the place where storks die. We are not seabirds. I need you to understand this. We are not gulls. We are not terns. We are not albatross, built for the open water, built to ride the salt wind for days without rest. We are land birds. Our wings are made for thermals, for the warm rising air that the sun pulls from fields and cities and hillsides. Over the sea, there are no thermals. Over the sea, there's only the flat, cold, indifferent air that gives nothing back. Over the sea, we must fly by force. Every wing beat is earned. Every mile is paid for in the currency of muscle and fat, and the slowly diminishing reserve of energy that the body keeps for emergencies and that the sea demands as rent. The sea is the tax collector. The sea takes what you have, and if you don't have enough, it takes you. We crossed at the narrowest point, the strait, the place where the two lands almost touch, where you can see the other shore from the air, a thin dark line on the horizon, trembling in the highs. But even at the narrowest point, the crossing took hours. Hours of beating, hours of the flat dead air, hours of the wings growing heavier with each stroke, as though the feathers were filling with water, as though the sky itself were pressing down. I flew beside my mother. She was tired. I could see it in the angle of her neck, in the slight stagger of her wing beats, the rhythm breaking, recovering, breaking again. The way a drum breaks rhythm when the drummer's arm begins to fail. She was not young. She had made this crossing many times, but each time the crossing takes something, and the something is not given back, and the crossings accumulate in the body the way snow accumulates on a roof, and one day the roof says, enough. She was not there yet, but she was closer than she had been the year before. I flew beside her. I matched my wing beats to hers, not because it helped, because it was the only thing I could do, because the sound of our wings beating together was the sound of I am here. I know you. Stay close. And we flew. 2 birds fell during the crossing. I saw the first one go. A young one, born that spring. Not strong enough. Not fat enough. The reserves used up. The wings slowing. The beats becoming shallow, inefficient. The body losing altitude the way a stone loses height when the hand that threw it runs out of force. He fell. Not fast. Not dramatically. He fell the way a leaf falls from a tree in autumn, slowly, turning, drifting downward in a long, lazy spiral that might have been beautiful if it had not been fatal. He hit the water. The water received him without sound, without ceremony, the way the sea receives everything, calmly, completely, without giving anything back. I watched him float for a moment, the white feathers on the dark water, the wings spread, the body still. And then the sea took him under, and we flew on, because that is the law. You do not stop. You cannot stop. The sea does not allow stopping. The sea only allows forward. We reached the other shore at dusk, Anatolia. The land rose out of the sea like a prayer being answered, brown and green and solid. The hills covered in low scrub and olive trees, and the dusty roads that wound between villages, and the thermals, the blessed, beautiful, life-saving thermals, rising from the sun-warmed land like columns of invisible grace. We found the first one, and we rode it upward, all of us, the whole flock, spiraling up in a great turning wheel of wings, and the relief, the physical, muscular, bone-deep relief of not having to beat, was so total that I closed my eyes. I closed my eyes, and I floated. And for one moment, the sea was behind us, and the dead were behind us, and the sky was warm and wide, and ours. For one moment. We flew south over the Anatolian plain for 3 days. The land below was beautiful in the way that all land is beautiful from above. Simplified, abstracted, reduced to color and shape. The brown of the plowed fields, the green of the orchards, the silver thread of the rivers, the white cubes of the villages, scattered across the valleys like dice someone had thrown and not picked up. The villages. I loved the villages, not for the people in them, not for the houses or the mosques or the smoke rising from the chimneys in the early morning, for the sound. From very high up, the sounds of a village reach you thinned and softened by distance. The call to prayer from the minaret, a human voice, stretched thin by the air, reaching up toward us like a hand that cannot quite touch. And the church bells from the Christian quarters, lower, slower, a sound like stones being dropped into water. The two sounds, overlapping, braiding together in the air above the rooftops. I did not know what they meant. I did not know the words, or the gods, or the reasons. I only knew the sound, and the sound was beautiful. And the beauty of it reached me in the sky and touched something in the chest that I do not have a name for. Perhaps you would call it longing. We call it nothing. We do not name it. We only feel it, a tightness in the breast, a slight turning of the head toward the earth, a momentary desire to stop, to land, to fold the wings and stand on a rooftop and be still. But the pull said south, and we flew on. The first sign was the silence of the old ones. I noticed it on the 4th day. The old storks, the ones who led, the ones who read the wind and chose the thermals and set the direction. They had gone quiet. Not the ordinary quiet of flight, a different quiet, a tighter quiet. The quiet of creatures who are listening for something they do not want to hear. Their heads were moving, scanning, not downward, the way they scanned for food. Not forward, the way they scanned for thermals. Upward. They were scanning the sky above us. I had never seen them do that before. The sky above us was the sky, empty, blue, the ceiling of the world. There was nothing up there except clouds and the sun and the thin, cold air that no wingbeat could reach. Nothing. But the old ones looked up, and their feathers were tight against their bodies, and their eyes were wide, and the sound they made, the low, throat-deep sound that means danger, was so faint that I almost missed it. Almost. We were approaching the mountains above the plain, the mountains that rose to the south like a wall, green at the base, brown in the middle, white at the top, where the snow still held in the crevices and the wind came down cold and sharp. And below the mountains, at the foot of the mountains, where the plain ended and the slopes began, a city, a green city, a city of gardens and minarets and red-tiled roofs, a city that sat at the base of the mountain the way a child sits at the base of a tree, small, sheltered, looking up. Bursa. I did not know its name then. I did not know any city's name. Cities were shapes. Cities were sounds. Cities were the smell of smoke and bread and animals, and the 1,000 complicated odors that humans produce simply by living together. But I know its name now. Bursa, the city where the sky changed. The old ones began to descend, not to land, not to rest, to fly lower, closer to the rooftops, closer to the ground. This was wrong. Storks fly high. Storks ride the thermals. Storks belong in the upper air, where the eagles cannot. Eagles. I smelled them before I saw them. That sounds strange. You think of eagles as things you see, as shapes against the sky, as silhouettes, the broad wings, the white head, the curved beak. But I smelled them. A smell like iron, like blood, like the air before a storm, metallic and sharp, the smell of a predator, the smell that every prey animal knows before it knows anything else, because the knowing is not learned. It is born. It is written in the same blood that writes the map of migration. The smell said, above you. The smell said, do not look up. The smell said, fly low, fly fast, fly together. I looked up. It was sitting on the air. I don't know how else to say it. The eagle was not flying. It was not gliding. It was sitting. On the air. The way a king sits on a throne. Without effort. Without movement. The wings spread. Enormous. Wider than I had imagined any wings could be. Wider than the shadow they threw on the ground, which was the shadow of something that did not belong in the same sky as us. It was golden. Not the gold of your coins, the gold of the sun at the edge of the day. Deep, warm, alive. The feathers caught the light and held it and threw it back, and the eagle glowed against the blue sky like a coal in a cold hearth. It was looking at us. I know this because I felt it. Not saw it. Felt it. The weight of its attention. The pressure of being seen by something that sees you not as a creature, not as a neighbor, not as a fellow traveler in the shared country of the air, but as food. Or worse, as trespass. The old ones knew. They had known for days. That was the silence. That was the scanning. That was the reason they had brought us lower, closer to the rooftops, closer to the complicated air above the city where the thermals broke and swirled, and the flying was harder, but the height was less, and the eagles lived above. The eagles owned the upper air, the clean, cold, open sky where the thermals peak and the wind is steady and the world is laid out below like a kingdom. That was their country, and we had been flying through it for days, without knowing, without permission. The first attack came at dusk. The light was going orange, the way it does in Anatolia in the autumn, when the sun drops behind the mountains and the air turns the color of apricots, and the shadows get long, and everything becomes gentle and slow. Except the eagle. The eagle was not gentle, and the eagle was not slow. It came from above, from the place where the light was brightest, from the direction you cannot look because the sun is there and the sun blinds you. And the eagle knows this. The eagle has always known this. The eagle hunts from the sun the way a soldier attacks from higher ground. It came fast. Faster than I had imagined anything could move. Faster than the wind. Faster than the fear that was already spreading through the flock like a sickness, bird to bird, wing to wing, the fear passing between us the way heat passes through metal. It hit one of the young ones. I did not see the impact. I heard it. A sound like cloth tearing. A sound like a branch breaking. A short, sharp, violent sound that did not belong in the sky, that belonged on the ground, in the world of things that break. And then the falling. A body. Tumbling. The wings loose. The neck at an angle that wings and necks do not make. Falling not like a leaf this time, not slowly, not turning, but fast, straight. The weight of a dead thing returning to the earth, with the urgency of something that should never have left it. The body hit a rooftop. I heard the impact from the sky, a soft, distant thud. And then the silence, and then the sound of humans, voices rising, confused. And then the church bells, starting, because the humans did not know what was happening, and the bells were the only voice they had for things they did not understand. The bells rang, and the eagle rose back into the sun, and we scattered. Scattering is the wrong word. We did not scatter. We broke. The flock broke the way glass breaks, into pieces, into shards, each one flying in a different direction, driven not by thought or plan, but by the pure, animal, ungovernable need to be somewhere else. Anywhere else. Not here. Not under the shadow. Not in the airspace of the thing that kills from the sun. I lost my mother. In the breaking, in the scattering, in the 3 seconds between the attack and the fear. I lost her. Her wing was beside my wing, and then it was not. Her sound was in my ear, and then it was not. The thread that connected us, the thread of blood and memory, and the low sound in the throat that means I am here, I know you. The thread snapped, and I was alone, in the sky, above a city I did not know, with the light going orange, and the bells ringing, and the eagle above me. Somewhere. Always. Somewhere. I landed on a minaret. I did not choose it. My wings chose it. My body chose it. The body said, down. Now. Anywhere. The minaret was tall, stone, a thin tower with a balcony near the top, and a pointed roof, and the voice of the muezzin still echoing in the stone, the last note of the evening call hanging in the air like a thread of smoke. I stood on the balcony. I folded my wings. I looked out at the sky, and the sky was empty. Empty in a way it had never been. Not the emptiness of open space, the emptiness of a room that has been cleared, the emptiness of a place where something has happened, and the happening has driven everything else away. The flock was gone. The eagle was gone. The sky was empty. And I was standing on a minaret in a city called Bursa, and the sun was setting, and the air smelled of bread and wood smoke, and the distant iron smell of the thing that had broken us. And I did not know what to do, because the pool said south, but south was where the eagle was, and the law said fly. But flying meant the open sky, and the open sky was no longer ours. I stayed on the minaret through the night. The city below me settled into darkness. The lights came on, small lights, oil lamps in windows, the glow of charcoal in the braziers of the night vendors. The sounds came. The bark of a dog, the cry of a child, the creak of a cart on the cobblestones, the murmur of voices from the coffee houses where men sat and drank and argued about things I could not understand. The human sounds, the ground sounds, the sounds of creatures who do not need the sky. I envied them. For the first time in my life, standing on that minaret, I envied the creatures who walked, who crawled, who burrowed into the earth and pulled the dirt over themselves and slept in the dark, underground, where the eagles could not see them. I envied them their heaviness. I envied them their inability to fly. Because the sky that I had loved, the sky that was my country, the sky that I had been born to and had lived in and had measured my life by, the sky had become the place where you die, and the ground was the place where you live. And I was a bird, and a bird that is afraid of the sky is a bird that has lost its name. In the morning, I found others. Not my flock. Pieces of flocks. Fragments. Broken groups from broken families, scattered across the rooftops of Bursa like white stones thrown by a careless hand. 3 on a chimney. 2 on a wall. 1 standing alone on the dome of a bathhouse, its feathers ruffled, its head turning, scanning the sky with the jerky, desperate movement of a creature that has not slept. We gathered. Not by plan, by instinct. By the same force that gathers the pieces of a broken cup. If the cup could move, if the cup could choose to press its shards back together. We gathered on a rooftop near the market. 17 of us. Out of how many? I did not know. I had not counted the flock before the breaking, because counting was a human sickness, and I had not yet learned the human sickness of needing to know the number. 17. Some were from my flock, some were not. Some I recognized by the pattern of their feathers, by the angle of their flight, by the particular rhythm of their wing beats that was as individual as a voice. Some I did not recognize at all, strangers. But storks do not have strangers. Not during migration, not during the pool. A stork is a stork. A flock is a flock. The borders between families dissolve in the sky the way salt dissolves in water, and what is left is only the direction. South. We were all going south, and the south was blocked by eagles. The old one was there. I do not know his name. We do not have names. But I knew him by his size. He was large, larger than most, with a wingspan that threw a shadow I could have stood inside. And by the scar on his left leg, a thick, white, raised line where something had once gripped him and he had pulled free. He had been gripped and had pulled free. That is all I needed to know about him. He stood in the center of the rooftop. His head was up. His eyes were on the mountain, the great green mountain that rose above Bursa, the mountain where the eagles lived, the mountain that was both landmark and threat. He looked at the mountain, he looked at us, and he made the sound. Not the danger sound, not the flight sound, a different sound. A low, steady, continuous sound that I had never heard before. A sound that was not a word, but was more than a word. A sound that meant, as far as I could understand, we wait. We waited. 3 days. 3 days on the rooftops of Bursa. 3 days without flying. 3 days of folding the wings and standing and watching the sky and listening for the sound of air being displaced by something large. The humans noticed us. Of course they noticed. 17 storks on a rooftop is not a thing that goes unnoticed. They stood in the street below, and they pointed and they talked. And the children, the small ones, the ones whose heads tilted back to look up at us, the way my head tilted back to look at the eagles. The children laughed. They thought we were visiting. They thought we had chosen their city, their rooftop, their chimney. They did not know we were hiding. The second attack came on the third day. Not on us, on another group, farther south, a flock of perhaps 30, trying to cross the valley between the city and the mountains. I saw it from the rooftop. The eagles, not one this time, but 3, came down from the mountain, from the high places, from the snow line, where the air is thin and cold, and the thermals are treacherous, and only the eagles know the currents. 3 of them. They moved together, not in formation the way we fly, looser, more fluid, like fingers closing into a fist. They hit the flock from 3 directions, and the flock broke, and the bodies fell. I watched from the rooftop. I watched the white shapes falling against the green of the mountain. 5, 6, 7, falling slowly, turning in the air, the wings loose, the necks at the wrong angle. They fell into the city, into the streets, onto the rooftops, into the gardens and the courtyards and the market square, where the vendors were selling tomatoes and peppers and the red-brown spice that smelled like the earth itself. The bodies fell among the tomatoes, and the humans looked up, and the church bells began to ring, and the call to prayer began to rise, and the 2 sounds braided together above the city, and the eagles circled once, slowly, calmly, without hurry, and returned to the mountain. The humans began to talk. I could not understand their words, but I could read their bodies, the way they pointed at the sky, the way they pointed at the dead birds in the streets, the way they gathered in groups and spoke quickly, their hands moving, their voices rising. They were afraid, not of us, not of the eagles exactly, of the strangeness, of the wrongness, of the fact that birds were falling from the sky and dying in the streets, and no one knew why. Some of them thought it was an omen. I know this because of the way they looked at us, at the 17 of us on the rooftop, with a mixture of pity and awe, and the particular unease of humans who believe that the behavior of birds means something about the intentions of God. We did not mean anything about God. We meant only that we were afraid, the same as them, the same fear, the same confusion, the same inability to understand why the world had changed and what the new rules were and how to survive in a place where the sky, the oldest ally, the first friend, had turned against us. On the 5th day, I found my mother. She was on a rooftop 3 streets away, standing alone. Her feathers were wrong, dulled, flattened, pressed close to her body in the way that means cold, or fear, or sickness. Her left wing was held at an angle that was not the angle of rest, the angle of injury. I flew to her, a short flight. 30 seconds. The most terrifying 30 seconds of my life, because 30 seconds in the open sky above Bursa meant 30 seconds visible, 30 seconds exposed, 30 seconds in which an eagle could see me and decide. I flew, I landed beside her. She turned her head toward me, slowly, with effort. The clouded eyes focusing, unfocusing, focusing again. She made the sound. I am here. I know you. Stay close. But the sound was thin, stretched, like a thread that has been pulled too tight and is about to break. I pressed my wing against hers. Her wing was cold. She had been hit, not by an eagle directly, by the falling, by the scattering. In the chaos of the first attack, she had collided with another bird, or with a wall, or with a branch of a tree, and the left wing had taken the damage, not broken, not torn, but something inside the wing, something in the joint where the bone meets the muscle and the muscle meets the feather. Something had shifted. She could fly, but not far, not high, not south. I stayed with her, on the rooftop, through the night, through the cold that came down from the mountain and settled on the city like a blanket made of iron. I stood beside her, and I felt her breathing, the shallow, too fast breathing of a body that is working too hard at the simple business of being alive. And I thought, this is what the sea does. This is what the crossing does. It takes something, each time, and the something is not given back. And one day, the something is too much. She had crossed too many seas. She had flown too many miles. She had given too much of herself to the pull, to the south, to the law that said, fly when the body said stop. And now the body had stopped, and the eagles were on the mountain, and the south was on the other side of the eagles. And my mother was standing on a rooftop in Bursa with a wing that could not carry her home. The old one with the scar came to us on the 7th day. He stood on the edge of the rooftop, and he looked at my mother. He looked at her wing. He looked at the angle of it, and he made a sound I had not heard before. A sound that wasn't danger, and not flight, and not wait. A sound that was quieter than all of those. A sound that meant, she cannot come. I knew what it meant. The flock, what was left of it, the 17, and perhaps others who had gathered in the days since. The flock was going to try, going to fly south, going to run the valley between the city and the mountains, fast, low, through the complicated air above the rooftops, where the eagles could not dive without risk. They were going to try, and my mother could not try with them, and I had to choose. The south, the pull, the law, the blood that said go, the map that said fly, the instinct that said south, 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 louder than thought, louder than love, louder than the sound of my mother's breathing on a rooftop in the cold, or her, the cold wing, the clouded eyes, the thin sound in the throat, the body that had carried me, that had taught me the thermals, that had flown beside me for every crossing I had ever made. Her. I stayed. The flock left at dawn. The old one with the scar led them. Low. Fast. Through the narrow air above the streets. The humans in the market looked up as they passed. A river of white wings, flowing south through the channel of the buildings. The wing beats so close together they sounded like a single wing. They flew south, toward the valley, toward the mountains, toward whatever was waiting on the other side. I watched them go. I watched until the last white shape had disappeared behind the ridge, until the sky above Bursa was empty again, until the only sound was the wind on a rooftop and the bells in the distance and the breathing of my mother beside me. I watched them go, and the pull inside me screamed, south, 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 and I did not go. We stayed in Bursa for many days. I lost count. Not because I cannot count. I told you, counting is a human sickness, and I have caught it now, after all these years. But because the days in Bursa had no edges, they bled into each other. Morning, evening, night, morning again. The same rooftop, the same sky, the same mountain, the same eagles. There was a storm on the 3rd night, not a windstorm, not the kind that changes direction and clears the sky. A wet storm, a cold storm, the kind that comes down from the mountains and sits on a city and does not move. The rain fell all night, not the rain of the flatlands, which is soft and warm and smells of grass. This rain was cold, hard. The drops hit the stone of the rooftop with a sound like pebbles being thrown, and the wind drove the rain sideways, and there was no shelter. A rooftop is not a nest. A rooftop has no walls, no eaves, no overhang. A rooftop is the most exposed place in a city, the place closest to the sky, which is the place we loved, and which was now the place we feared. We stood in the rain, my mother and I. She pressed against me, not for warmth, though she was cold, though her feathers were soaked and flattened, and the cold was reaching through them to the skin beneath. She pressed against me, because pressing was the only language left. The rain fell, and the wind blew, and the lightning came. White lines across the sky, jagged, brief, illuminating the mountain in flashes, the dark shape of it, the snow at the top, the trees on the slopes, and somewhere among the trees, somewhere in the dark, the eagles. Did the eagles sleep? I did not know. I still do not know. I have thought about it many times, whether the eagles slept in the storm, whether the rain touched them the way it touched us, whether the cold found its way through their golden feathers the way it found its way through ours. I do not think so. I think the eagles were warm. I think the mountain sheltered them. I think the cracks and the caves and the high places where they nested were dry and still, and the storm passed over them the way a river passes over a stone, touching but not entering. The eagles were warm, and we were cold, and the mountain was dark, and the lightning showed us everything and then took it away. More storks arrived during the storm, refugees, like us, broken pieces of broken flocks, driven to the city by the eagles and the weather and the simple mathematics of having nowhere else to go. They landed on our rooftop, on the neighboring rooftops, on the chimneys and the domes and the minarets of Bursa, wet, exhausted, some of them injured. One had a gash across its breast, long, clean, the mark of a talon, and the feathers around the gash were dark with blood that the rain was slowly washing away. It stood on the edge of the rooftop, and it trembled. Not from cold, from the memory. I have seen that trembling in many creatures since. The trembling that comes after the danger has passed, but the body has not received the message. The body that is still running even though the legs have stopped. The heart that is still pounding even though the thread is gone. The body remembers. The body always remembers. By morning, there were 40 of us on the rooftops of Bursa, 40 storks, grounded, waiting, watching the sky with the nervous, jittery attention of creatures who have been taught, in the space of a single dive, that the sky is not their friend. The humans came to look. More of them now. Not just children. Adults. Old men with beards and prayer caps. Women with covered hair and worried eyes. They stood in the streets below, and they looked up at us, and they spoke to each other in low voices. I heard the word they used. I did not understand it. But I heard the shape of it, the way it moved through the air, the way the other humans nodded when they heard it. They were talking about us. They were trying to understand. And I thought, you cannot understand, because you are down there, and the understanding is up here. The understanding is in the wing that was broken, in the body that fell from the sky, in the shadow of the eagle that moved across the rooftop like the hand of a god. The understanding is in the fear, and you do know our fear. You have your own. A boy brought us food, a small boy, 8 years old perhaps. He climbed the stairs of the building. I heard his footsteps, quick and light on the stone. and he appeared on the rooftop with a bowl. Fish, small fish, silver, still wet, the kind that you catch in the rivers near the city and eat fried with salt. He set the bowl on the stone. He stepped back. He watched. We did not move. 40 storks, standing on a rooftop, staring at a boy with a bowl of fish. The absurdity of it, the tenderness of it. A child feeding the refugees that had fallen from the sky. One of the old ones moved first, slowly, cautiously, the way all old things move when they are not sure whether the world is offering a gift or a trap. He ate, and then another ate, and another. And the boy smiled, a wide, gap-toothed, radiant smile. The smile of a child who has done a thing, and the thing has worked, and the world, for one small moment, makes sense. I ate. The fish was cold. The fish was small. The fish was the kindest thing anyone had given me since my mother's wing was whole. The dead birds in the streets became a problem. I say this because I saw it. I saw the humans trying to deal with the bodies of the storks that had fallen during the attacks, the bodies that lay in the market and the courtyards and on the steps of the mosques. They gathered them, carefully, gently, with the particular care of people who do not understand what has happened, but understand that it deserves respect. They laid the bodies in rows, along the wall of the market, in the shade, the white feathers against the brown stone, the long necks and the long legs and the red beaks, all still, all silent, all pointing in different directions, as though even in death they were confused about which way was south. An old woman stood over the bodies, and she wept. I watched her from the rooftop. She wept the way I have seen human women weep, with her whole body, with her hands over her face, with the sound that comes from the stomach and not the throat. She wept for us. I do not know why. We were not her birds. We were not her family. We were strangers who had fallen from the sky into her city and died in her streets. But she wept, and the weeping reached me on the rooftop, and it touched the place in the chest that I do not have a name for. The place that tightens, the place that turns, the place that you would call grief if you had a word for it. We do not have a word, but we have the place. I could see them sometimes, in the mornings, when the light was right. Small shapes against the blue, riding the high thermals, circling the peak of the mountain the way the moon circles the earth. Patiently, endlessly, as though they had been there since before the mountain was a mountain, and would be there after the mountain was gone. They were not hunting. Not always. Sometimes they were just there, just present, just the fact of them, the weight of them in the sky, the way their shadows crossed the city and moved across the rooftops and touched us without touching us. That was enough. The shadow was enough to keep us on the ground. My mother's wing did not heal. I knew this the way I knew the direction of the south, not by looking, not by measuring, but by a knowledge that lived in the body. She stood on the rooftop, and she held the wing at the angle that was not the angle of rest. And day by day the angle grew worse, and day by day the wing held less and less of the light, and the feathers that had been white were going gray, the way feathers go when the body beneath them begins to let go. She was dying, not from the wing, from the staying. A stork that doesn't migrate is a stork that is dying. The body knows. The blood knows. The map inside the blood says south, and when the body does not go south, the map becomes a wound, and the wound becomes a sickness, and the sickness is not a sickness of the body, but of the self. The self that is made for flying. The self that is made for going. The self that has no word for stay. She was dying of staying, and I was staying with her, and the staying was killing me too. Not my body. My body was young and strong, and the wing was whole, and the muscle was sound. Myself. The self that was made for going. The pull was inside me every moment, a tide that rose and fell, and rose and fell, and would not stop. The blood saying south, the bones saying south, the feathers saying south, every part of me pointing in a direction I could not go, because she was here, and here was north of south, and I had chosen here. She died on a morning when the air smelled of snow. I was beside her, on the rooftop. The sun was just coming up. The light was the color of the inside of a shell, pale, pink, thin. She was lying down. She had been lying down for 2 days. A stork that lies down is a stork that is decided. Her breathing was the breathing I had heard in the crossing, the shallow, too fast breathing, but slower now, with spaces. I pressed my wing against hers. Her wing was very cold, and the breathing slowed, and the spaces grew, and the last space came, and the breathing stopped, and the rooftop was quiet, and the city below us was waking up. The vendors opening their stalls, the children running to school, the dogs stretching in the gutters, the smoke rising from the chimneys, the city waking up, the way cities do, as though nothing has happened, as though the world has not changed. But the world had changed. My mother was gone, and the rooftop was very large, and I was very small. I stood beside her for a long time. I do not know how long. The sun moved across the sky. The shadows moved across the rooftop. The sounds of the city rose and fell, and rose again. I stood. And then I did a thing I had not done since the flock left. I opened my wings. I spread them wide as they would go. Wider than I needed for flight. Wider than I needed for anything. I opened them and I held them, and I stood in the sun with my wings open over the body of my mother. I do not know why. I do not know what it meant. Perhaps it was grief. Perhaps it was prayer. Perhaps it was the body doing the only thing it knew how to do when the mind had nothing left. I opened my wings, and the sun came through the feathers, and the shadow of my wings fell across her. And for one moment, the shadow looked like the shadow of 2 birds. I left Bursa on the same day. I did not wait for evening. I did not wait for the thermals. I did not wait for anything. I flew south, alone, through the valley, through the complicated air, through the space between the city and the mountain where the eagles lived. I flew low, fast. The rooftops below me, the mountain above me, the eagles somewhere in between. I did not look up. I did not scan. I flew the way the old one with the scar would have flown, reading the currents, feeling for the thermals, staying in the broken air above the buildings, where the wind was unpredictable and the eagles could not dive without hitting stone. I flew between the minarets. I flew through the gaps between the domes. I flew so close to the rooftops that I could see the tiles beneath me, the cracks in the mortar, the herbs growing in the window boxes, the face of a woman looking up from her washing as I passed, her mouth open, her eyes wide, her hand frozen in the act of wringing cloth. She saw me, one stork, alone, flying through the city as though the city were a canyon, and I were the water at the bottom. She saw me and she crossed herself, or touched her heart, or made whatever gesture her people make when they see a thing they cannot explain and want to ask God about. I did not slow down. The valley narrowed. The buildings ended. The open ground began. The fields between the city and the foothills. The flat, exposed, windswept ground where there were no minarets to hide between and no rooftops to fly under. Open ground, open sky. I was visible. I flew faster. Lower. My belly almost touching the grass. The tips of my wings brushing the tops of the thistles. A flight that wasn't flight, but running. Running through the air the way a fox runs through a field. Low, flat, every muscle committed to the single purpose of being somewhere else. The foothills rose, the trees began, the pines and the oaks, and the dark, shadowed spaces between them where the light did not reach and the eagles did not go. I flew into the trees, through the canopy, through the branches, the wings folding and opening and folding again, the body turning, dodging, the instinct taking over, the ancient, pre-migration, pre-flock instinct of a prey animal moving through cover. I flew through the trees, and the trees ended, and the other side of the mountain was below me, and the valley was behind me, and Bursa was behind me, and the eagles were behind me, and the sky, the wide, clean, empty, unbounded sky of the south, was ahead. I did not look up. I did not need to. The sky ahead was mine, not because I owned it, because there was nothing in it that wanted me dead. And that was enough. That was more than enough. I did not look back. Not because I did not want to, because looking back, for a bird in flight, means turning. And turning means slowing. And slowing means being visible for 1 second longer than necessary. And 1 second is all an eagle needs. So I did not look back, but I carried Bursa with me, in the way that a stork carries its birthplace, in the blood, in the map, in the place inside the chest that tightens when the wind smells of bread and wood smoke and the iron scent at something that rules the sky. I carried Bursa. I carry it still. I flew south for many days after that. Alone. A stork alone is a wrong thing. A stork alone is a note without a song, a feather without a wing, a direction without a flock. But I flew. The loneliness of a single bird in migration is not a human loneliness. Human loneliness is the absence of company. You miss the voices, the faces, the touch. Bird loneliness is the absence of rhythm, the rhythm of the wing beats around you, the rhythm of the flock, the way 100 birds become a single thing, a single breathing, a single direction, a single decision made by no one and obeyed by everyone. When you fly alone, there is no rhythm. There's only your own wing beat. And your own wing beat, heard alone, is the most desolate sound in the sky. I rode the thermals. I read the clouds. I followed the rivers and the roads and the shape of the land that the map in my blood knew even when my eyes did not. I passed over cities I did not know. Cities in the south of Anatolia. Cities in the curve of the coast. Cities where the minarets were thinner and the light was sharper and the air smelled of salt and pine. I passed over villages, small places, a dozen houses, a mosque, a well, a field, the smoke of a cooking fire rising straight up in the still air. And in each village, on each chimney, a nest, a stork's nest, old, built and rebuilt over generations, the same chimney, the same corner, the same view, the familiar shape of sticks and mud and patience sitting on the chimney like a crown. And some of the nests were empty. Some of the nests had no bird in them, no mother rebuilding, no father standing guard, no chicks crying for food, empty nests. I flew over them, and each empty nest was a sentence. And the sentence was, they did not make it. They did not cross the valley. They did not pass the eagles. They did not survive the sky above Bursa. They are in the streets, in the rows along the market wall, in the memory of the old woman who wept. Empty nests. The saddest thing the sky can show you. I crossed another sea, a smaller one, warmer. The thermals held longer over the water, and the crossing was easier than the first, and I made it without resting, without stopping, without the terrible flat dead air that had killed the young one on the first crossing. I made it, and Africa was below me. Green, wide, endless. The green that is not the green of Anatolia, not the green of the flatlands, not the green of any place I had been. A different green, a deeper green. The green of a place where the rain comes hard and the sun comes hard, and everything that grows with a ferocity that borders on anger. I flew south, over the desert, over the savannah, over the rivers that were wider than any river I had known, brown and slow and full of things that watched you from below the surface. I flew until the pull stopped, not gradually, not slowly. The pull stopped the way a bell stops ringing, all at once, complete. I was there, the winter ground, the resting place, the other end of the map. I landed, in a field, near a river, under a tree whose name I did not know. I folded my wings. I stood still, and the stillness was enormous, and the silence was enormous, and the absence of the flock was enormous, and I was alive, and my mother was not, and the eagles were in Bursa, and the sky was very wide, and I was very small. I am old now. I've made the crossing many times since that year, many times over Anatolia, many times through the complicated air above Bursa. The eagles are still there, on the mountain, in the high air, circling, patient, permanent. The eagles will always be there. They were there before us. They will be there after us. They do not migrate. They do not pull. They do not feel the tide in the blood that says go. They stay. And because they stay, they own. And because they own, we die. That is the law of the sky, not our law, not the law of south and north and the thermals and the pull. Their law, the law that says the sky belongs to the one who claims it, and claiming it means being willing to kill for it. And we are not willing to kill for it. We are willing only to fly through it. And flying through is not the same as owning. Flying through is what guests do, and guests can be turned away. I still fly over Bursa. Every year, every migration, the same route, the same valley, the same complicated air. And every year, I look up, and the eagles are there, and I fly low, and I fly fast, and I do not stop. But sometimes, when the light is going orange and the air smells of bread and wood smoke, and the bells are ringing, and the call to prayer is rising, and the two sounds are braiding together above the rooftops of the city, sometimes I look down at the rooftop where she died, at the place where I opened my wings, and I think, there are two kinds of creatures in this world, the ones who stay and the ones who go, and the ones who stay own the mountain, and the ones who go own the story. And I don't know which is better, but I know which one I am. I am the one who goes. I have always been the one who goes. South in the autumn, north in the spring. That is the law. That is the only law I have. And the sky is wide, and the sky is dangerous, and the sky is mine. Not because I own it, because I cross it, again, and again, and again, and again. Remember us. The white wings over the sea, the bodies in the streets of Bursa, the old ones with clouded eyes, the young ones who fell, the flock that broke like glass, the mother on the rooftop, the shadow that looked like two birds, The sky does not remember. The sky does not care. The sky is the oldest country in the world, and it has no borders, and it has no king, and it has no memory. The sky is the same sky that was there before the eagles, and before the storks, and before the mountains, and before the cities, and before the humans who built the cities, and named the mountains, and watched the birds, and wept. The sky doesn't remember any of us, but I remember, and the remembering is the crossing, and the crossing is the life, and the life is the sky. South. South. South.